EasySOA. So, okay, I see that you've got 1,000 looks, like how SOA could be easy. That's the whole point of it. And one of the ways to make SOA easy is actually to put on it a collaborative twist, to say, hey, stop, this is not purely something technical. This actually involves different kinds of actors, not only developers and architects, but also business users who need new features, evolutions, and obviously operators who run actually the stuff day to day. So, collaboration between all these people is possible in the SOA field thanks to OW2 software. So that's why we are, yes, kind of a OW2 software use case, and I think a pretty original one. So stay tuned. You'll get more information about that in a few seconds. So I'm not going to say anything about that, except that Alain has stayed in Grenoble because he's full-on furthering his startup that's actually using software built on EasySOA. And Cedric, well, maybe he had too much conference yesterday, so. What's the agenda? First, a small EasySOA introduction, so that you get the challenges. And then, yeah, OW2 software in EasySOA is first and foremost FraSCAti by INRIA, in Nuxeo by Nuxeo. And there's a why are we using them, and there's a how with a architectural topics. And finally, we try to put that in pictures using scenario and demos, possibly even up to Talend integration. And we'll close with the roadmap questions and call to involvement, etc. So, EasySOA, in a nutshell, it's it's a systematic, yes, FUI project, collaborative project, sponsored, with a 4 million facial budget, 2 years project, started in November 2010, so we are halfway there. We had the mid-project meeting last week, a very promising one. We've got 5 partners that I'm going to detail later, and we've got an ambitious aim. That is making service-oriented architectures, SOA, simple to use, and on the perimeter of business use, development, production use, monitoring, everything. And all in the goal of actually throttling up the SOA engine in enterprise. So what's the SOA engine in enterprise? Well, for me, it's kind of like that. Okay, that's not a picture detailed enough. Okay, that's better. The SOA engine in the enterprise, in my mind, it's something where you've got business users with new or evolving use cases that actually need them to be implemented, tooled, provided, put in applications, software applications, business applications. Who actually specify those use cases, who work with architects to have them in the IT architecture, developers who actually implement the world stuff, and finally deploy them on the infrastructure that's run by IT staff, by operators, who actually finally provide the service, the required service, business applications to business users. And that's you know, it's like a wheel, it's like a never-ending process. For me, yes, SOA, it's an architecture. It's about a couple of services, but its goal is first and foremost to allow evolution and business-minded evolution. So, okay, throttling up the SOA engine, how can you make those arrows go even faster without ejecting the body, obviously? I remember my physics course. Well, actually, our idea is, as you can see, that we are not competing with traditional SOA middlewares, infrastructure, etc. You've got ESBs, you've got application servers that are very robust, that have the right architecture for high scalability, high availability, for distributed transactions, for distributed monitoring, high SLA, anything you want. So they do that very well. Sometimes it's required by critical deployments, by critical needs. So it's very important that they work. But yes, most common needs are not that critical, are not that, how can I say that? Yes, sometimes you've got simpler uses actually, that are less complex, that are have a smaller perimeter actually. And a simple example is that, well, first, before actually doing a big project, you're gonna do a small pilot project. And obviously, you don't need to use the same infrastructure or architecture, except if you want to validate the architecture. But otherwise, why use costly servers, costly replicated architecture if you don't have to? So, our idea is that, okay, yes, this is fine, but what about adding a lighter SOA layer around this traditional SOA core and protect it with an intermediate layer that we call core actually, and that's whose job is actually to synchronize the SOA model between the central traditional SOA middleware with the lighter layer, and also to protect central SOA from being impacted and hurt by unwanted use from a lighter layer. Why unwanted use? Well, because the lighter layer is lighter. It's got less validation. It's got less constraints. I mean, actually, it's got more constraints because you've got this protection layer here. But here, you don't need to ask, for example, your main SOA architect about calling a service here, because you're going to be protected by default SLA configuration here. That's very strict, that's very enforced. No, it's never going to scale because it's prevented from scaling. But if you want just to try some things out, to prototype things, to make a few calls, to get out a few data out from some services, to have an idea of whether it would actually be possible, whether it would actually be useful, well, that's very interesting. And that's what we are actually proposing. So, that's what I've just said. And this lighter layer is not only lighter thanks to web technologies, that's light, web technologies, web interface and things like REST, etc. But also because of a lighter process, okay, less validation, less constraints, and a non-line social and collaborative approach that's better to involve all actors of the SOA process. So, yes, I've said that these actors are business users, SOA architects and developers, and IT staff. And what's that useful for? Here's a more detailed list. First of all, ex nihilo service discovery. So what's that? It's not talking to a UDDI, though we could actually, but not that many people are using UDDI. I see a lot of services everywhere, and I don't see a lot of UDDI at all. Some people even say that it's dead, but I won't talk back from that people, so I'm not saying anything. Just saying that before doing anything with services, you have to know them. And that's about, auditing existing services. Where are they? And you've got a lot of ways to do that. You could scrape HTML web pages looking for WSDLs. For example, you've got a wiki. Hey, let's see where WSDLs are linked in the wiki. You could scrape code. You could listen to exchanges. Just say your software infrastructure is using a new HTTP proxy that will, hey, I'm seeing HTTP messages, that's SOAP. Oh, that's not SOAP, but that's maybe REST-ish. Let's go XML in it or JSON. You could discover using architecture import. If you've got architecture diagrams, we're using the SCA standard. There are others. You could even import from design time, development time. Well, and once you've got that, you can browse them. You can classify them. You can view them. That's cartography, and you can document them. And we think that's a very, very important point because SOA is first and foremost about documenting services. What services are you using? Who's using them? To do what? Which services need, which are the services to work? How are they configured, like what kind of SLA? When will they go down? When will they be replaced? So, yeah, that's like governance. It's different. You know, you have those two parts. Documenting services is about information about services, and governance is rules on this information. So, first you have to have documentation. And collaborative, it's a very important point of it, because if you got that only in Eclipse, I'm sorry, but outside of developers and architects, you'll get nobody on board. And all business information about services will be useless. That's too bad. And sanitization and protection of existing SOAs. So that's about saying that if everybody was doing SOA perfectly, well, you wouldn't have to actually, make things saner to protect yourself from, for example, a WSDL where all fields are optional strings. I've seen that, including IDs, including dates, etc., etc. I've got worse examples. And it's not that the guys doing that are bad, maybe they are, but it's first and foremost a strategy decision by the employers of saying developer. They knew that he wasn't the right guy for that. They didn't even want to invest in something really SOA. So, well, at some point you have to work with problems. You have to work with in an unperfect world. that's not news here, and that's about sensitization protection from existing SOAs that you are consuming. For example, like tracking changes of outside services. Say your service provider is pushing up a new evolution. The WSDL doesn't change, but the behavior changes. He forgets to tell you about the new version because, well, WSDL didn't change, no problem here. Well, actually it breaks your own code because the behavior changes. And, well, the only way to actually try to protect yourself from that is to try to see different patterns in the exchanges that you are making with it. And that's a way of protecting yourself from tracking changes that you're not alerted from in outside services that you're consuming. And even further, help gathering and fast prototyping business needs on top of existing applications without hurting them. No. So that's kind of what I was talking before. It's like before asking ID about a new feature that's going to be developed and get out of IT only in 6 months from now. Well, first, let's try to get the information to get to the same kind of behavior out of the architecture in a very simple, very prototyped way. Hey, let's just see first if it will work, and even better, if it would actually be useful. And that's what our protection layer and agile layer is for up there. And finally, well, everything that you gather, you can reuse them. Requirements, architectural shell, tests, mockups, to ease re-implementation above the existing traditional robust SOA solution if you actually want your need to scale.